about the news of the day and what we've got here with the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Russia agreeing to lead an unprecedented oil output deal, as the Wall Street Journal reported over the weekend. Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the U.S. have agreed to lead a multinational coalition in major oil production cuts after a drop in demand due to the coronavirus crisis and a month-long Saudi-Russian feud that had devastated oil prices. The deal, sealed Sunday, came after President Trump intervened to help resolve a Saudi-Mexico standoff that jeopardized the broader pact. What is it with the history? And I think in the Alamo there, when we're talking about a standoff with Mexico and so forth. As part of the deal, 23 countries committed to collectively withhold 9.7 million barrels a day of oil from global markets. See, the big problem here, what we've been seeing with oil, has been that there has been a glut in production, where Saudi Arabia and Russia have consistently been increasing their production. They haven't been holding it back, yet at the same time, consumers have not been able to go out there and purchase oil. That is gasoline, because, well, technically they could, but they haven't been doing it so much because they've had to stay at homes. So it's been a double whammy, plus the coronavirus situation, all sorts of things happening that have been negatively impacting oil, but it looks like we have a deal that was reached. Ambassador Sam Zakhem, looks like we've got him. Ambassador, are you there, my friend?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm so glad we got you here. So former Ambassador to Bahrain, Sam Zakhem, served both the Reagan and Bush administrations as ambassador to Bahrain. In addition, Ambassador Zakhem was called back to duty to help lead and spearhead the diplomatic effort in the first Gulf War at the request and behest of former President George H.W. Bush. And he joins us now. Ambassador, my friend, happy belated Easter to you. So great to be with you.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Jimmy, anytime.
So, my friend, let me just ask you, because I was teeing up on the issue of oil. I mean, this is something that we have seen the dynamics change quite a bit as the United States has become increasingly a leading producer of oil on the world stage. We saw an agreement reached over the weekend, U.S., Saudi Arabia, Russia, deciding that they will slow down their production, which has been the glut in production, as I noted, has been really hammering U.S. oil producers. What do you make of it? What's your understanding of what happened, sir?
Well, the whole world would be better off. The producing nations, all of them, would be better off if the oil production falls down, because, it's, as you say, it's a double whammy. The pandemic and the decreasing in the price of oil, the decrease in the price of oil, along with the pandemic, creates a double whammy for any nation producing oil. So it'll be great for OPEC and other producing nations to join together, along with Russia and Saudi Arabia, so that the oil prices would stabilize a little bit and hopefully will start going up, so that oil producing companies can stay in business rather than go bankrupt.
Ambassador, one thing that has been striking to me is the difference between how the United States operates in the oil and gas world and countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia do, in that they're basically state-owned industries in those countries, whereas in the United States it's privately owned, and private companies are able to make production decisions based on supply and demand. You don't see that in the same way from those other countries, do we?
You're right on. And they are actually responsive to the whims of the leadership in both countries. In our country, we have a free enterprise system. Each company decides what it wants to do, and the government does not control either the production or the price of oil or the refining of oil. But many of the refining companies are getting close to being bankrupt now.
Yeah, well, it is a case that this has put a real strain on American oil and gas producers, for example. Now, there has been discussion of whether the Saudi Arabian government in increasing their production previously and Russia doing the same, if it's just more of a spat between the two of them, or if those countries are trying to disadvantage, or were trying to disadvantage American producers. Any thoughts on that, Ambassador Sam Zakhem?
Well, we are one of the top oil-producing nation in the world, and I don't trust Russia. And frankly, even though I know the people of Saudi Arabia and they've always been close friends of the United States, when it comes to each country's national interest, I don't trust either of the two nations doing what's right for us. So we have to do what's right for the United States of America and for the oil companies of our country.
Well, one thing that I think is very critical to keep in mind is that this deal happened over the weekend. Ambassador Zakhem, the United States, the Trump administration, leading Saudi Arabia and Russia to an agreement to reduce production of oil in their countries. And I think this is significant, particularly vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia, because it underscores the influence that the Trump administration has been raising once again in the Middle East for the United States. That is to say, and you and I have talked about this many a time on the airwaves, is that the Obama administration really worked hard to build a strong relationship with Iran, but at the cost of a relationship with the Middle Eastern allies and countries that are in the region, such as Israel, such as Saudi Arabia. And when the Trump administration came into power, the president and his top advisor said, we need to move forward with a stronger relationship among these countries, in addition to saying no to Saudi Arabia, in addition to saying, no to Iran, and in terms of getting out of the Iran nuclear deal as the Trump administration did. And these different policy changes have helped to build up more of an influence and sway of the United States in the Middle East with partners like Saudi Arabia, to the point where President Trump moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and we hardly heard a peep from those countries, the Arab nations in the Middle East, about that.
Hear, hear. 3 years ago to the month, I was speaking in Abu Dhabi, and that's the year when President Trump was elected to office, and you should have heard the leadership there praising Mr. Trump and criticizing vehemently President Obama and his administration. You hit it right on the head, Jimmy. We rarely ever had been so much respected as we are now in the Arabian Gulf and in Israel and the whole Middle East. They love Mr. Trump. They trust Mr. Trump. And they have great respect for our country under his leadership. As you said, if they did not care for Mr. Trump, there would have been a great revolt against America when we recognized Jerusalem as the rightful capital of Israel, and especially when we gave the Golan Heights to Israel. Not even Syria objected.
It's so fascinating. Former Ambassador to Bahrain, Sam Zakhem, our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Ambassador, going off of what you were just saying, my understanding of the region, especially in talking with you, are two things are very important to keep in mind. One is strength and respect. Those are critical in order to get these countries to take you seriously and to be willing to listen and maybe not throw a fit, so to speak, when you move the capital or recognize that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, or when you go to the table with them, you're actually able to bring a deal about when it comes to reducing oil production levels and so forth. That's one thing, strength and respect. Another thing that we're noticing, and that is important to keep in mind, is the idea of bad or worse. Look, you're going to have dictatorships in the Middle East, no matter what. You're going to have Arabic dictatorships in the Middle East. But the question is, are those countries more often than not advancing American interests, or are they constantly going against American interests? And Iran is an example of the latter, while Saudi Arabia would be the former, and that's critical to keep in mind.
You said it accurately. Yes, the fact that the Obama presidency was so pro-Iran and so anti-Arab, anti-Saudi, and anti-Arab Gulf, the GCC states depended on us so much militarily. And the Minister of Defense of Bahrain personally told me President Obama denied even the state of Bahrain that houses our Fifth Fleet, denied them the purchase of even ammunition for the M16 rifles that we had sold them. He said, now we have to use the Chinese and Russian guns because Obama would not sell us ammunition even. Obama was a fiasco for America's national interests as far as the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, the 6 states in the Gulf, are concerned.
Yeah, it's so critical, too, to look at the economic plan, the path to prosperity plan, or rather peace to prosperity plan that the Trump administration has been moving forward with, because when we see the Middle East, you look at the region, and it has been very difficult economically. It relies so much on oil. You have a lot of poverty there. And the Trump administration has recognized, it seems to me, Ambassador Zakhem, that you need to improve the economic reality in the Middle East in order to bring about peace, because if you don't, then they're going to be just trying to scrape by as opposed to having something really to live for, which is a better life for themselves and for their families. And so as my friend Samuel Laurie has put it many a time, that when we see terrorism, we often see it really grow in areas of poverty. And if you can address that as well as the diplomatic side of things, you can help to bring about maybe not full peace, but at least a little bit of cessation of tensions and terrorism in the region.
Yes, very much so. And it did bring down the level of violence between Hamas and Israel. Unfortunately, it has not yet been implemented. Because I think of some erroneous politics or erroneous policies on the side mainly of the Palestinian Authority being pushed by Hamas not to accept this goodwill proposition by the administration of Mr. Trump, and that would very much alleviate the economic hardships that the Palestinian people are facing both in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. I hope they will come to their senses on both sides and accept the proposal of Mr. Trump, because it will bring economic relief to those who need it the most, which are the Palestinian people in both the West Bank and Gaza, and it will bring peace to Israel.
Former Ambassador Sam Zakhem, before we let you go, I want to ask you one final question to kind of tie everything together, please. The significance of the oil deal we saw reached Trump administration with Saudi Arabia and Russia over the weekend, and also what we're talking about as far as the broader dynamics in the Middle East. How would you bring them all together in terms of a representation of how the Trump administration's Middle East policy has been conducted over the past 3.5 years or so?
I think it has been a very creative, very constructive, and a policy that negated the horrible feelings that the Obama administration created in that region of the world. And as you eloquently stated, there was not even one finger raised against all the goodwill that Mr. Trump showed toward Israel. And this latest thing that Saudi listened to us and Russia listened to us in terms of decreasing the production of oil, that shows that really the Trump administration is doing a super job, particularly in the Middle East.
Very interesting points as always. Former Ambassador to Bahrain Sam Zakhem, thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. Really appreciate you sharing your insights here on Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure, as always, to be with you.
Same here. The pleasure, in fact, is all mine. Again, former Ambassador Sam Zakhem joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Always a treat to talk with Ambassador Zakhem. His insights, his experience provide tremendous content for us to dive deep into here on the show. I'm sure he will be back in the future. Once again,